Welcome to my channel, I'm Gary Wiryawan, and today we're going to talk about all-rounder lens for micro four thirds. Let's go! Before we continue with today's video, if you are a subscriber of my channel, welcome back. I hope that you will enjoy this video and thank you always for your support for my channel. If you are a new viewer, also welcome. I hope that you will enjoy this video as well. And in this channel, I will talk about photography, filmmaking, camera, lenses, travel photography, street photography, that kind of stuff, as well as music, home recording, guitar, rock, metal, that kind of stuff as well. So if you are into those kind of things, please consider subscribing to my channel to support me. Alright, now let's continue with today's video. So in today's video, I will compare some micro four thirds lenses that I consider to be all-rounder lenses, the only lens that you probably will ever need. The criteria for these lenses are actually quite simple. First criteria is that you can use this lens without having to have another lens to back up this lens or to cover its focal length. 2. The focal length must be flexible and versatile enough for everyday kind of needs, not for special kind of needs. We're not talking about landscape photography, which requires ultra wide angle lens, or wildlife photography, which requires you to have ultra telephoto lens. Without further ado, now let's go to the lenses themselves. First lens is the most obvious one, the Panasonic Lumix 12-35mm f2.8, or its Olympus version, the 12-40mm f2.8. So why I consider this lens to be an all-rounder kind of micro four thirds lens is because of several reasons. First, the focal length. It goes from 12mm to 35mm. So in full frame term, this is like your 24-70mm f2.8 lens, which is a very versatile focal length. You can go moderately wide at 12mm and then you can zoom in a little bit for a close-up shot at 35mm. So this is an excellent focal length in my opinion. Next reason, this is really great for everyday kind of use, general purpose kind of lens because of the large aperture of f2.8. While f2.8 is not the largest aperture that is available for micro four thirds, 2.8 is large enough so that you can use this lens for lower light situation as well as to get a little bit of background blur if you zoom it all the way to 35mm or if you can get close enough to your subject at any focal length. So this is quite an important feature to have in a lens like this. Next important feature that makes it a great general purpose all-rounder lens is the image stabilization. So this lens has image stabilizer, which makes it possible for you to record smooth video footage without jitters, or if you're doing photography, it will enable you to take slower shutter speed, especially in lower light condition. Next important feature, this lens has weather sealing so that you can use this lens in weather that is less than ideal. If there's a light shower, drizzle or anything like that, you can be confident to keep using the Panasonic 12-35mm f2.8 or its Olympus version. If you've watched my other videos, you might know that this is my most loved micro four thirds lens. I use this lens so many times and it's been my workhorse kind of lens, and that is for a good reason. Besides the features that I just mentioned, this lens also produces image quality that is sharp, that is very contrasty, that is very punchy, and the size itself, although it is a little bit large when compared to other micro four thirds lenses, it's still small when you compare it to full frame or APS-C lenses. And that makes this lens a really great option if you only just want to have one lens for your general purpose kind of everyday lens. Next lens is this guy right here. It looks similar to the previous lens, to the 12-35, and this is the Panasonic Lumix 14-140mm f3.5 to f5.6. Whereas the 12-35mm is better for general purpose kind of everyday lens, this is your all-in-one lens when it comes to travel. And that is simply because the Panasonic 14-140mm packs the most flexible focal length range, ranging from 14mm, which is moderately wide, all the way to stunningly zoomed in 140mm, which is a little bit telephoto, and it's perfect for travel because you can cover so many things, including potentially a little bit of wildlife photography, or if you want to photograph or take a video of something that is very far away and you want to punch in really close. This lens also features image stabilizer built into the lens to help you to take smooth video footage or take slower shutter speed when it comes to lower light situation. The only problem with the 14 to 140mm is the fact that it doesn't have large aperture. It only goes to f3.5 at 14mm, and at 140mm it goes down even further to f5.6. So this is not a low light monster like the 12 to 35mm f2.8. You can still get pretty decent background blur if you zoom it in all the way to 140mm, but you don't get the lower light performance, and at 14mm it's a little bit more difficult to get that background blur. My particular version of the lens is the original one, the first version, the classic 14 to 140mm f3.5 to f5.6. The newer second version has weather sealing, which makes it perfect for travel. Although this doesn't have weather sealing, I'm still not gonna switch to the newer one because I'm fine without it. Even when I'm traveling, I've used this lens in a less than ideal weather condition before, and the lens performed just fine as long as I don't do something too crazy with this lens. Speaking of image quality, this lens produces great image quality. It is sharp, it is punchy, it is contrasty. Now, compared to the Panasonic 12 to 35mm f2.8, this guy right here is slightly sharper when you zoom it in all the way, when you pixel peep into the pictures, or if you punch in into the video. But that doesn't mean that the image quality here is bad. It is certainly more than good enough, especially for my needs. So yeah, between these two lenses, I would consider the 12 to 35mm 2.8 to be more suitable for your general everyday kind of lens. But if you are traveling, then I would consider the 14 to 100mm to be a better choice, simply because of the focal length. By the way, I made reviews of this guy, so you can check on the link on the description below if you wanna watch the review of each of these lenses. Last lens that I wanna discuss and compare in this video is this Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7 Summilux. Whereas the two previous lenses are actually zoom lenses, which really makes sense when it comes to general purpose all-rounder kind of lens. This lens right here, the Panasonic Leica 15mm, is actually a prime lens. It doesn't zoom and it only has one single focal length, which is 15mm in this case, or 30mm in full frame term. Now you might be asking,
Hey Gary, it's a prime lens. Why are you including this lens on this video? You're talking about general purpose kind of lens, right?
well, the answer is because 15mm, in my opinion, is the most versatile focal length for micro four thirds general purpose kind of everyday lens. The explanation is actually quite simple. Most people use their smartphone every day to take pictures, and this is the most used kind of cameras in the world, whether you like it or not. And one of the main lenses is actually a 28mm lens in full frame terms, which is very close to 30mm, which is 15mm in micro four thirds term. So yeah, you can actually mimic using your smartphone using this lens. I personally find 15mm to be very flexible. I can do food photography with it, I can do product photography easily with it, environmental portrait, if there's a flower on the street that I wanna capture, I can just use this lens. This is very useful for all sorts of different kind of things. And for video, 15mm is also excellent. It's not too wide, but it is still wide enough for most things that I wanna capture. Also, the aperture of f1.7 is quite crucial because it helps you in two aspects. First, it'll help you in lower light situation so that you don't have to crank up your ISO too high to get that high shutter speed that you need. And also, when it comes to background blur, it'll help you to get blurrier background. And although it is not as blurred as using this 12 to 35mm at 35mm f2.8, it is still more than blurred enough to make your footage or your photographs more dreamy and more surreal, you know. The image quality produced by this lens is excellent. It is very sharp, it is very contrasty, it is very punchy, it has good colors, and there's a certain kind of look that I get from this lens that I don't really get from any other lenses. I cannot really explain it to you, but it just feels slightly a little bit more punchier when compared to the other lenses. Maybe I'm just imagining things that is not really real, or maybe it's just a placebo effect. I don't really know. I'm not really sure, but the fact that matter is I really enjoy using this lens as my all-rounder, general purpose, everyday kind of lens. If I don't need to zoom in, zoom out, and I just want to have something that is very simple and easy to use. So now let's compare the Panasonic Leica 15mm with the other two lenses that I just mentioned, the Panasonic 12-35mm f2.8 and the Panasonic 14-140mm. So the 12-35, if you are doing general purpose everyday kind of photography and filmmaking, if you don't have any specific kind of needs, you just want a lens that is flexible and can do so many things and has a large aperture, then this guy right here, Panasonic 12-35mm f2.8 is your answer. If you are traveling, if you're going somewhere and you need the flexibility of being able to go wide and go telephoto, then the answer is this guy right here, the Panasonic 14-140mm. Now, if you just want something simple, you just want to have a simple lens, an easy to use, a very small one that doesn't really get in your way and produce great quality, this guy is the answer, the Panasonic Leica 15mm. It forces you to slow down a little bit, to be more involved with your photography as well as your video or filmmaking, and just think more about the process rather than just thinking about the result. This is the answer right there. This makes you enjoy photography and video more, whereas the other two lenses are more result oriented. Anyway, I've made a review about the Panasonic Leica 15mm. You can check on the card above or link on the description below. So yeah, these are the three lenses that I want to talk to you today about general purpose, everyday kind of versatile lenses. So I've only talked about three of them, but I'm sure there are other lenses that will fill similar categories with these lenses, and I'm sure that they will do just fine. The reason why I only talk about these three lenses is because I own them and I have personal experience with this lens. So I'm really sure about what I'm talking about, and I'm sure that if you get any of these lenses, you cannot go wrong. You'll be satisfied with any of these three lenses, and I'm sure that it will fit your requirements for your photography or filmmaking. And that concludes today's video. So that is all for today's video. I hope that you find this video to be useful. Please comment down below what is your all-rounder general purpose lens. Also, if you have any questions about anything in this video, you can also comment down below and I will try my best to answer them. Also, don't forget to support my small channel by liking this video, sharing this video and subscribing to my channel down below. It will really help me a ton to motivate me to keep making these videos for you. Alright, thank you and goodbye.